all also simple 탐제가 또 톱잘라나 마체마 산제 고마를 뭐cha 진내야 토바차 이 제도 아니 배 장조 셈바 랍자나면 수치도 냥서 랑게 라월에 신고 신발에 트고 토발에 도제쇼 마노아지 거든 아니 가서 봐봐도 다가저 로정도 쇼데 닝게 예선서 고바차
So we begin by setting our motivation again, motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the fearless state of enlightenment in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And we know that this is a task that we need to do by perfecting all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings in turn, we need to be exposed to the correct information to be able to rely on a valid text to be able to explain those. And that in that context, I am here this morning to hear a text from the mind training set of texts.
다 남주는 시전에 가서도 랑게 뛴들라 딱간자 뛴게 난가라 뭐 랑게 진짜 자외라마 임발라 남바 아니 저 가서도 딱간자 저 가서도 남바제레시 딱간자 차도체도 보다 전에 저 셋업 뭐죠.
And so, again, as we normally do, we begin by setting up the figure of the merit field in the space in front of it. In actuality, our own kind Wu in the aspect here of Chenrezig, for example, the 1,000-armed, 1,000-eyed Chenrezig.
아니 랑게 타고도야 아니 랑라 진체에 아니 배 마킹게 심제 탐제 딱가 세디 파마네 저배 딱간제 세디 파마 생감에 파마 띵가마 파마 매반에 아니 딱 등이 잡배 아니 좀 마킹게 심제 탐제 딱간제 마사와 매바자 좋아지고 심제 탐제 어떻게 랑 타고도 요소자체
And that in the space all around us, we are visualizing all kind mother sentient beings. From the father and mother that we've had in this life to the father and mother from a previous life and the previous life to that and so on, going back to beginningless time so that we have this concept of all kind mother sentient beings being in the space around us.
그래서 파마제에 가서 진짜 뭐 이마 봐서 파마 마제에 가서 하장 그 진짜 뭐 임백다 타이가 마제 센저 탄자 다 마사오면 요섭서 어디를 고마셔
And we are visualizing all, the countless numbers of sentient beings, kind mother sentient beings all around us. Of course, understanding the great kindness of those who have acted in the role of parent towards us, but also those who have not acted in that particular role, they are equally kind to us as well.
어디서? 아니 대다 탐자자, 아니 대화되자, 대외포, 미대바 동해대. 아니 배 동해기 나냐다 동해 찍찍 저거 양조 동해죠 동해지 유거 동해지 유원 딱 이제 랑기 용화를 빠나 하고도 랑 코아바 이바 인사 아니 동해지 유거라 아 동해 또 숙청도 야 동해什么지 고통 야 동해什么지 고통 못네 세들라 차차나 마시고 봐도 딱 이제 못네 지 자수가 벌어듯이 저 용되겠다 다 타이가 맞아 진짜 탐자가 어다 계속 어떤 전에 여대게 나도 다다 가서 미를 왔다 녀석을 겨워낸 거도 다 지레 나가러 왔다 어때 그 요한테가 동네 나서들라 동네 대화 맞고 소요마 동네 맞고 짠자리다 얘네 못 주네 나한테 요한테가 딱 간자죠 메시지 닝제 깼네 아니 그 가서 들래 타네 딱 간자지 대다 아니 동네 탐제 자잖아 치모로 저와 주제 아니 대화 탐제 동네 매바 대화다 대나 치마로 대바 주자 대바 다기 자와 대다 제노바된 라마제레스기 아니 지금라도 소소다제 안디 체도 아니 라마제레스기 다가제 가서데 이담도 파티했잖아 아니 안다가제 라마제레스 고마토바 지기니 또서 어디는 고마시
And that we are, of course, cognizant that all of these kind mother sentient beings, these countless mother sentient beings, they very much want happiness, but they are bereft of that happiness. They very much want to avoid suffering, but they find themselves inundated with that suffering. And indeed, it's a case of going from one suffering, getting over that, only to again fall into the next suffering. And that we ourselves can verify this by our own experience here in cyclic existence, knowing how, until we die, we are going through really what is kind of a litany of suffering. A conveyor belt of suffering, and we overcome one suffering only to run into the next. And so it's like this full ocean of cyclic samsaric suffering, and that and even so we are aware that this is something which is much more preferable than the suffering as experienced in the lower realms. And so that is something that we need to understand, that all kind mother sentient beings, in all of these different realms are going through unbearable suffering, and that we very sincerely want to be able to do something to free them from that suffering. And so we make our supplication to our meditational deity, Chenmezig, Avalokiteshvara, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from that suffering. May I free them from that suffering. I will be the one to free them from suffering. Oh, Guru deity, please bless me to be able to do this.
What the commission? Taka Rangi Tundala, and Lama Chedesi, Goran Lama, and Lama Chedesi. And what a chat watcher to commercial day, and then Joe on Jamba to go home, then the Yigasum said, come. And the Ranga told Santa Tanja let you on Jamba to go home, Yigasum. And the Lama Chedesi, two gay, Yigi home tele, and it took us a West Pado member Tuna, Shin Ramjan and Nebe, and Yeshiva, all other Java Chen Tane, and it under Tamsiba, and the Lama Chedesi, Tula Conte and Tilla, part Tim, and only a uncle. And that, and the neck of the only uncle, and we give a Uki much. August, the Konda, we are making Uki much, what is commercial.
And so that we again bring our attention to the figure of Chenmezig in the space in front. In actuality, our own kind guru, in the aspect here of the 1,000-armed, 1,000-eyed Chenmezig, for example, and that the figure is marked at the three places with the Hum. And that likewise ourselves and all kind mother sentient beings are similarly marked with that at the crown, at the throat, and at the heart. Now, from the central figure that we're visualizing, the light rays begin to emanate, countless light rays, in fact, from the hum syllable at the heart, going into the pure realms and inviting all of the wisdom beings and empowering deities from their natural abodes. And they return. The wisdom beings dissolve into the figure of Chenmezig. The empowering deities confer the empowerment, and then from that nectar of empowerment overflowing on the crown, the figure of Amitabha appears.
What is commercial? And then the Lama Jeres see, and do the set up your tea, and the was a Kunda Soros in the Salomata. Was correct, Lama Jeresima, and a delay, and a delay, and a prevail about Tayava, Kala can do with Tujegi, and that Kala can do it, and a pair Tuja, and a Caso Tujala Pembe Cheto, and a pair prevail about not so much then, and a pair Takaja Tuba, young subject to a check, young to young to be not so Takata, Chicaso, the Caso, she would take a Takaja, because of the 24 hours 7 days. That's the huge condition to be not so part, young part, and the Kana can do with to check down. What did they show you much?
And so in our visualization of Chenrezig, the central figure, the single figure in the embodiment of all of the mirror field in front of us, that we avoid the kind of sensation that it's some sense of two-dimensional, or it is simply a stagnant statue type figure, but the fact that it's actually really Chenrezig there in front of us, a very live figure, and that as such it is also it's an extremely busy environment whereby Chenrezig is emanating countless versions of himself, going out in all the directions to fulfill the needs of sentient beings that with which he has a connection. And they are returning and constantly, so there's this constant to and fro, 24/7, coming and going of the emanations of Chenrezig, fulfilling the purposes of sentient beings. It's a very vibrant scene that we should visualize.
그래. 나랑도 제레스 무슨 제모니와 인도 아니 제레스에서 남자 매진 네팔 꾸죠. 남자로 와. 어떻게 많이 거지. 와. 뭐저 제레스라도 네팔 다 인디아네 스웨샤가 꾸죠. 롤 차고도. 돌을 거든. 어떻게 매버죠. 문 디고저 다 지금 셰다 제다 그래서 거저 뭐 트여서 쳐들어. example 소리 쳐라. 문에 보라 봤다 제레스 에 가서다 천이 연수 절 뺐다 그럼 가서래 저기 가서래 현대 배면도 좀 두게 그렇아 아니 냠바르 샤신뱅만에 냠바르 샤신뱅만에 딱가자 아니 가서 산제 고마 톱사나 아니 가서래 냠자자 제도 가서래 냠바르 샤신뱅만 되게 좀 배면도 좀 다들 산제 해줄 봐 가서 시티 방와 인자 나도 샘제 이만아 사그자 토벌 잡아이네 자주 사바이네 제라 자주마 이게 냠발 샤베 갈라 아니 제도 레 제도고 요마데 가스나 코 시티 방메 바인자 다 산데 시티 방서 냠발 샤시바 가데 제도고 레 냠자 오예메 냠자 오예메 냠발 샤시마네 제도고 레 차자 제도마치 차자 제도다 뭐들서 어디 산데 키도 가서 시티 방나 뒤두고요 시티 바바나 두고요 말에 돈이 모습도 돈에 핑거요 막 시제 집에 마바나 시집 방수나 아니 디 냐바 샤시병간에 아니 제도 내 차사 제도에지 요거 여러 와다 어디를 저 땡에서 냐바 샤시병간에 선제부터 아니 24hour 7째 어디다 좀 되겠지 가라 간디기 어디를 공부해 어디자
So that in no way is this figure that we are visualizing some sort of solid representation, like a statue that could have been created in India or Nepal, and that these are simply, examples, aids for us to be able to visualize, the reality of a Chenrezig. So it's a real live figure that we are visualizing here, a figure that is able to spontaneously and effortlessly and continuously work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Why is this? Because having attained a state of enlightenment, this is simply an aspect of, and in this case, the kind of like emphasizing the compassionate aspect of enlightenment, with which Chenrezig is working toward or working with. And so this occurs because of the fact that Chenrezig, as indeed all enlightened beings, have overcome or eradicated the obscurations to omniscience. And so this allows for this capacity to spontaneously and effortlessly 24/7 to work for the benefit of sentient beings. This is occurring all the time. And so we have this sense of this absolute constancy, consistency, and unbroken work for the benefit of sentient beings that is being done effortlessly and spontaneously. And so it's not just a question of whoever realizes emptiness directly. This is not doesn't qualify them to be able to act for sentient beings in this way. Because when one realizes emptiness, say at the level of a bodhisattva, or level of an arhat or any other practitioner, that one has this experience in the meditative absorption time, but when arising from that in the the post-meditative situation, one does not have that understanding, that ability to combine the conventional and ultimate aspects. And so it's only with the eradication of the obscurations to omniscience of the enlightened Buddhas that one has that capacity to remain in meditative equipoise, but also to be able to perform in a conventional sense like this.
그래서 산계의 심정이 켜바디 연구를 심제 안에 배 지가서 땡에서 배 땡에서 제 토벌을 내게 얘랑 다 좀 받아보 아니 장생게 안에 배 살을 내게 되네 이제 뭐 임네 땡에서 냐바 샤온도 아니 그래서 땡에서 냐바 샤시면은 챤도 딱까지 배면 좀더 용도 말아 다디 임미도 산계 임미 켜바찬 거 시티방 마법 켜바찬 거든 딱 가이나면 이제 내주던데 심바체죠 이게 심바체죠 좋아 심바체다 좋아 배는 것도 셔럽님보다도 셔럽님보다 좀 되게 냐바 샤시면 안에 아니 저기 가서 제레스라 다 제레스 사축 다들 셔럽님보다 유에 되게 제레스데 자주 삼아 사축 지다 제레스 산계에 이나 사축바에 나바던 셈제가 나바던 쇼 자주 삼아 나바던 아니 공개 공제 아니 다다디 다다디 샤리부게 마 제레스는 지와타나 동반이 거마 지와타나 게 도와 지와나 아니 제레스게 내게 산계 좀 되대 사문 나와 게 땡에슬라 다 땡에슬라 사문 나와 시죠 땡에슬라 냐바 산계 좀 되대 땡에슬라 냐바 샤시면 아데 아니 바 징길라네 아니 샤리부게 제레스라 지와타야 아니 제레스 내게야 아니 냐바 샤시면 아니 산계 좀 되대 렉소 스메트 요구도 딱 산계 그러와 냐바 샤 쇼데 땡에슬라 배세죠 냐바 샤시면 아니 냐마 지금 저들은 내겨도 딱 산계 캐주와 산계 캐주들 요구도 어때 티카서 시티 방마방 캐봐 어때
And so this is really quite distinguishing, one of the distinguishing factors between a sentient being and a Buddha or an enlightened being, whether or not they have eradicated the obscurations to omniscience. And so even though one may have excellent meditative concentration and so on, like very high level, like an arhat, for example, or even a high level bodhisattva, and that they are able to abide realizing emptiness directly through their meditative absorption, but once they arise from that, then they are in the post-meditative sense. It's two different realities for them. They maintain that kind of duality, whereas an enlightened being, Buddha, having abandoned the obscurations to omniscience, is able to perform whilst in meditative absorption in the conventional sense as well. There's no duality there. So this is kind of exemplified again as pointing out in the Heart Sutra, for example, where we have the figures of Chenrezig, Shariputra, and the Buddha himself. The Buddha remains throughout the sutra in a meditative absorption, and then also you have the figure of Shariputra asking the question about emptiness, and the figure of Chenrezig here. And here it's even though the Chenrezig is a fully enlightened Buddha himself, but here he's in the aspect of a 10th level bodhisattva. And he is answering Shariputra's question. And we notice that towards the end of the sutra, the Buddha says, well said, well said. And so kind of like it shows us that the Buddha actually, even in meditative absorption, is directing operations here. He's directing Shariputra to ask the question about emptiness. He's also directing Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, to answer that question in the way he did. And so he says he then approves of everything that's gone on because, in fact, the Buddha has been kind of like pulling the strings, as it were. Well said, well said. And so this is the particular quality of the enlightened being, what distinguishes an enlightened being, a Buddha, from ordinary beings, that they can operate both within the ultimate state and the conventional state at the same time.
그래서 주마멤버 멤버 draw chen 다가져요. 주 라자 주바 그저데 마 제레스를 파티 야 심제 감담 몇번이면 야 주바 나서 뭐 되는 와다 간데 이제 전배 주베를 만나서 뭐 어디에 슈테 와서 어디에 좀 공부해 주는데 셋업 어디에 아니 되게 아니 라야다 심제 탐지거든 어다 제레스 데이터도 공부하면 지만 토마 주제 토마 쇼제 이 제도 다 간제 지금 안 가서도 다 간제 레 아까제 자주 쓴다 돈이 또 비시라는 얘기는 남의 지금 삼사 어디도 공부해 어디에
So then we have our guru Chenrezig in the space in front of us, really engaged in the benefiting of all of the sentient beings with whom he has that connection with, and from them they have an affinity towards Chenrezig. And so the emanations are going out to ripen the minds of those who have not yet ripened, and further the ripening of those whose minds have been somewhat ripened, and then returning again. And that's a very vibrant, busy scene in the space in front. And again, that all ourselves and all mother sentient beings all around are watching this, looking towards this with incredible sense of faith and appreciation. And that this also desire how wonderful it would be to be able to attain that state of Chenrezig, and to be able to benefit sentient beings in that way. And so this is the scenario for us, and how wonderful it would be. May I be able to do this? I will be able to do this. So Guru Chenrezig, please bless me to be able to attain that state of enlightenment, that state where I can benefit sentient beings completely.
아니 되네다 소사지 잔도 야라도마 멘테다 제가 퓨스 워터도 용거 다가 지다 야라도마 지다 지가 가서 뒤남다 쓰기들 용거다 다 야라도마 피네 내가 야라도마 피네 다 제레스게 라한다 지금 야 주베로 만나서 마다버실래 마다베 나바 때네 마다베 심제가 투베 때네 안 심제가 되는 제가 파여 보자 다 되겠지 안 자야 지금 나가려 마대와 아니 저거 구에다 다 되게 용으로 와 다 진짜 야라도 매대도 좀 피네 어디를 책
And so, of course, now we offer the mandala offering and the seven-limbed practice as well, and as sincerely as we possibly can. This, of course, is not necessarily something necessary for Chenrezig, but from our own point of view, and indeed for all those who are being benefited by Chenrezig, this can have a very kind of a good effect. So that while remembering these kind of countless emanations that are going out from the figure of Chenrezig to benefit a really limitless variety of sentient beings, and including in that our prayers within the seven limbs of please don't enter into Parinirvana. Please keep turning the wheel of Dharma to benefit others, benefit sentient beings, all that. When we include that in our prayers, and this is to also be kind of beneficial for all those other sentient beings as well.
자주 선다 양다ben 다원이 냠스 랑고도 아니 디체도 다 로종은 냠네 지기 엔티체도 얘기 예술로 코스 제레스 콘슈버만 오다들 고바셰 쇼코트체.
And so that through our contemplations in this way, really settling our mind through the seven limbs, the offering of mandala, we kind of really enter into that kind of mandala of Chenrezig, and we bear that in mind while we are now entering into the study of this mind training text, where we want to perfect our view with regarding emptiness and develop that mind of enlightenment, of course. And so we kind of have that in the kind of company of Chenrezig. Right now, we will enter into doing that practice. I will do my very best to be able to apply these teachings so that I quickly can attain that state of enlightenment. 직제 접둔가 나가서 랑탄 냠베 멤베 게오리
라서 다들죠 다 간제 자주가 셈게 아니 냠네 다 모두 내 당고 이면서 내 당고 인도 아니 가서데 다 간제 가서데 다 랑게 가서데 그래 다 가서 내 당고 인도 아니 지금 가서데 지금 남네 제배 갑라다 소소 검시 매버 인사 아니 녀모 계획이다 계만 거 되기로 와 계만 다 가서 가서데 다 가자 저게 뭐저 그다데 저 라마체레스 고마 줘발라 장주 것선다 돈이 또베 셰라니 냠슬랑고 장주 선다 돈이 또베 셰라니 냠슬 말라나 탑메게 다데 이나 양 모두 내 당보하죠 랑 전제다 다지 머리 걸로 검시 전부 여바 인사 아니 걔만고 태운 거다 걔한테도 아니 먼저 삼도 단나 그래서 당고래 소 줘라다 다디 송고 여러 보다 다 같이 시원해 지를 진짜 랑다 냠바 매베 기부이 나 예원게 니다 제나야 라마 신도 그베 다니게 지볼렘바 계세 라린이 소대죠
So that as indeed, many of the verses here, we're addressing really from our point of view as rank beginners, and that kind of like in terms of engaging in practice. In other words, how we actually integrate these teachings into our lives. We don't have a habituation with regard to that. We're still very raw. That's kind of like in the notion of being a beginner in that sense, and that. So even though we're not habituated to being able to integrate the kind of correct thinking within these verses, unfortunately we are habituated to falling for the afflicted emotions so badly, so often. And so here it's saying that, what we be aware of, that the conditions which will trap us into our mental afflictions are so common, so much there, so prevalent, and that when we are engaged in trying to develop the mind of enlightenment, trying to correct the correct view and so on, to cultivate the correct view, it's that the question we ask ourselves, okay then, what will I think? What will I be thinking when I am placed into a difficult situation? Will I be able to apply the training I've done on the mind of enlightenment, the correct view? Or will I fall again into the habit, the strong habit that has been with me for so long, into developing or allowing the mental afflictions to flourish? And so this is kind of partly what is addressed in this verse number 17, where it says, if an equal or inferior person disparages you out of pride, place him as you would your spiritual teacher, with respect, on the crown of your head. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다 나라도 조로 되로 다 지금 사로 토로 다 지금 내당 다 코유게 내당 되는 나로라 가자란래 토요 가자란다 냐바요 가자란다 마요 다 나서바지 다 아니 그래서 나서바 요와 마세 안 데라 캄다 메바다 삼바다 되서 나서바 인기지 아니 데라 때는 다 간자 지금 가서라다 지금 코유 되는 나 대도 아니 지금 가서다 라를 줄라 즉 통마면은 라 진짜다 다지 마리과다 되게 돼 슈첨부 슈지요 맞지 근데 단다 답이야니 다 지금 밀려 산재기 때마다 제 지금 레데 이나야 왜 깬데 채나 아니 꽤 출처전 대대도 다 지금 지체어도 꽤 먹고 채운 거로 일이 꽤 먹고 채운 채워도 다 진짜 지금 내가 먹고 지금 딱 가서 저 데레스 투나 삼로 kartang gore tedes tuna samlo karta dit tuna samlo kartang gore sta choma go chine ane liu go do ngaratul maso jasula o tedes tuna ane samlo kartang gore tedes tuna samlo kartang gore tedes tuna samlo kart o choma go ne ti chene tak kaja rangi dazin rang chense da dazin mari kwa ni te shuk chung da tan da la tak kandes che go res chene tak hakyo do tak kaja 지금 너무 막이야 털다 너무 쓰다 랑게 잘 때와들래 이 세대 맞아 차라고 봐도 따라를 느끼게 그래 되네 있어 다들 마요 저도 탑시 가르치고 그래 용사들이 뭐 된데 누가 뭐 된데 저 용도 가르삼다 뭐 된데 저 용도 가르삼다 그랬다 초치 3개는 다 냠는 거 때는 쏜 것도 와 되네 있어 따라라 냠바 야나라래 멤바 되게 기부 되게 다다 ngaje기 가자라 다 ngaje기 공개 녀다 지나 다 되게 코란도 지가서다 지 녀다 제와 이나 다 제와 아 랑이 너무 깨끗해 되대요 봐 깨주대 대도 다 라라지 저저 제가 있는 가르치고 그랬으나 다 되게 가서라 다 간제 먼저 지금 초망고네 삼로다네 랑기 렌데 남샤데 셋다리 호도 말에 소속이 겨왕아마 토마네반데 아니 코아들라 깨데도 다제 상행 그 저와 나서봐 주도 아니 지금 수다 내가 깨다 깨체도 막고 용한테 그래 이게 내가 삼로다 아니 다 되게 제다 아니 초망고 저한테 아니 되게 다 딜라 때네 소소 세베 냠네 제토바이나 세베 냠네 제토바이나 다 랑게 오늘 인보들 랩투고 여바이서 다 세베 냠네 제겐게 라마 소로스테 라마 신도 아니 구베게 아니 다 간제 지게 다니게 지볼레는 라마 나시체나 다뒤 소소라 가서 뒤 세바 컴부터이나 아니 소소라 다 간제 지 세베게 표현지가 용의여도 아니 라마나시 시네다 지볼레바 렌토바 좋아이나 아니 계속 좁아도 좁아 차와데 제대로 계속 자주 선바속에 진짜시 냠슬랑게 요래스 오다 대한 것도 와 거들
So this is really a case of, being able to establish for ourselves a wide variety of counter forces in our thinking to offset the sort of like knee-jerk emotional reactions we have when situations as described in this verse occur. And that, it's kind of like also, important to kind of contemplate around this in relation to ourselves that, who are the people in our circle that we are likely to run into from day to day. And even when we have a precursory kind of contemplation on this, we can see that there's a wide variety of characters there, a wide variety of dispositions and personalities, and moods, and so on. And that it's something that's kind of, this is our environment of sentient beings, really. And to be able to kind of like work on that, like to preempt the kind of like negative possibilities there, so that you have a strategy in place in your own mind to be able to deal with is what this is about. And so here we first of all, recognize the importance of the fact that we are really, again, beginners. We're unexperienced. Our mental afflictions are so powerful that we have met with the teachings, we have met with teacher and so on. These are good points for us. But the conditioning to our mental afflictions is still something that is very overpowering, And so, then we have to start understanding the debilitating effect of self-cherishing and self-grasping in our thinking that has been so detrimental to us, not just in this life, not just since we become aware of it in the Dharma, but it's something that has played a very negative role for us in our lives, from life to life to life, since beginning this time. And so then we have to, ask and say, this is, this is something that we must kind of take a very structured, consistent attitude to uproot, to undermine first and to uproot, to say this way of thinking, of falling for the habituated self-cherishing response, self-grasping response in the face of something like this, when an equal or inferior person disparages me, and we can see how, in even imagining that situation, how kind of like tense we can get, how difficult that can be. And so we have to ask the question, what is the thinking I should insert in my mind at that time? And what is it that I should be thinking in order to overcome this? And so this is sort of in the context of really understanding how self-cherishing, self-grasping have been such debilitating factors in my life since beginning this time, from life to life to life, all these harms and so on. And then how I now should take this advice that's been offered by these great beings and seeing the logic of it, seeing the benefits of patience on that other hand, and how that can be something quite transformative in my life. I can understand that, having been around since beginning of time, how many lifetimes, countless lifetimes, I have engaged in so many, negative karmas, good and bad, and in the context of karma and so on. This sort of encounter with a person like this is inevitable. All that has to be are the conditions coming together that karma will ripen and so on. And so here, well, I have to be able to kind of have a strategy to put into place when, not if, these situations arise from me. And so that therefore, I will kind of fall on the side of patience. I understand that this is the most logical, beneficial attitude to take, and taking the essence out of any situation like this is not just kind of like a counter force, but it's something, when I abide in patience, it's something that you can gain great benefit out of that situation. And so that is the second two lines of this verse, where it says, what is the advice here? Place him as you would your spiritual teacher, with respect, on the crown of your head. So you're seeing such a person because they're offering you another great opportunity for patience. They are your guru. And that this is something that we see as something beneficial, greatly beneficial. And as it concludes, this is the practice of bodhisattvas.
네, 먼저 삼점 지금 소소히 남래 제마도 와들라 삼로 마당 와제 삼점 어디 저 먹을리기도 아니 들라 내지 말로 봐이나 코디 코 무지는 내가 끼기도 와 그래서 그 양보 삼로 따라지 것도 또서 녀목이 지금 요래 헛대로 것도 좋아지기도 이 거기에 내 바라 내 서버 거는 지마이나 아니 코디 코 검시도 제발로고 말이었어 다 주내와 제와다 파내와 제는 검시 제발로 두고 돼야 삼을 다해요 아니 맞아도 숙체도 그거를 더 숙소다 두고면 좋아 그래서 다 개띠군에 뱀맞지 지게 있나 소소 서버 검네 100% 녀목이 샤와도 마다 왔잖아 근데 봐 세외 톤에 아니 갑자기 짜두고 요나 그거 내줄로 가는 거 라 녀목이 샤와도 존에 텔라 뱀바 쪽으로 다 미시바 다 책임 제보 먹고 배줬단 그래 책임 제보 되게 개세그 줘봐 자기 말와 개세그 줘봐 자기 말 책임 제보도 먹고 배줬단 그래 먹고 배줬단 그래 디펜트하고 뭐다 랑게 텔라 녀목라 때 구조 마대에 토네 아니 세와고도 존에 아니 거다 뱀바 쪽다 다 갑자기 자이지다 같이 도와다 지금 용적으로 왔다 뒤 시계 온다 나서 용적으로 이내 랑이 셈티베 랑도 이제 소소게 랑첸세 지만내베 손에 제고 요와 아디 레라우지 말아디 야 똑바요 토벌 렘내면서 가버려
So that, the question has arisen, and sometimes has arises in situations like this, that when faced with a person who is disparaging or negative in some sense like that, we might pose the question, as has been done, and say, if I respond with patience in that situation, am I not also simply encouraging that person to continue with their negative behavior? Am I not doing anything to counteract his or her negative attitude? And so I think that when we think carefully on those kinds of questions, we see that there's some element of mental affliction involved in that thinking. And because in a situation like this, if we are genuinely thinking to benefit, to kind of like focus on simply benefit in that situation, and that means to be able to apply a pure 100% sense of patience with regard to the other person, and that is predicated on the fact that our own mind is still, is utterly calm, is in no way disturbed by what's going on in the situation. If that is the case, then that will certainly bring an overall benefit to that situation anyway. And so it's kind of like, that if we respond in some sense with a half-hearted sense of benefit and therefore a kind of like a fractured patience, then it's likely to not benefit ourselves, but also not benefit the overall situation. We're returning really with mental affliction in many ways. And so this kind of like, so it's kind of like really to recognize what is really of benefit as opposed to what sounds good. We can use many beautiful words to describe our kind of compromised attitude, but that is not the practice of bodhisattvas. And so here we have to kind of really look after our own mind to see that we're coming from the best place possible in our own thinking. And if we are true and honest and absolutely genuine in that, and then in a situation like this, there will be a lasting benefit.
계속이 남의 차대기로와 계속이 남의 차대기로 다 된대그 누가 마당 거 봐도 다 가자 지금 가서데 누가 마당 거 봐도 다 가자 개치슈데 랑이 너무 맞게 제 개치슈체 제 아니 되네 디 아니 가서 내가 깨봤디 아니 랑이 가서데 랑이 가서데 다 가자 지금 가서데 지금 장주 선배 제배 냠랭게 도와서 도와줬다. 근데 사모타는 요구도 어때 렌트에다 개치제도 와. 개치제도 도와다. 디제도 그다디 계속만 도와지. 전계속 도와지. 다디 제바이나 디제다는 라마시도 그베 다니게 치볼래나 계슬라니 스와트 호텔
So yes, so we have to make sure that there's no element of our self-cherishing attitude being put as an answer to the self-cherishing of the other who is disparaging us in this particular instance. And that means that from our point of view, we really have to employ the wisdom element to our response in order that we're taking as many of the different disparate conditions of the situation into account. So in one of them, it could be, timing, of course, is so important. And so maybe there is not the opportunity to make an effective response at the moment. We have to delay it for some time until the other person is in a better frame of mind. And so also, we have to sometimes admit that, this is beyond I don't have the ability or the power of mind to be able to respond in a skillful way right here. And so here the priority then is to kind of retreat to say the priority is to not allow any of mental affliction to arise in my own mind. That's what I must pay attention on in that scenario. And so here it's kind of like, to see whether, and this means really a thorough checking or an honest checking of my own mind too, to see, is there any element of self-cherishing at play here? Is there any mental affliction arising here? And so to be able to answer that clearly is very, very important. That's, that is really part of a bodhisattva's behavior to practice to kind of like have an honest appraisal of where we sit, where our minds are at all times, in order that we on the one hand, avoid obstacles to the development of the mind of enlightenment, but also we take advantage of all conducive conditions that can support the mind of enlightenment.
知道真正难的话，蒙古中国的话，可是按这个所说的这个农牧界的这根据些写了清楚下来也，写这个这个三六两的，按这马拉巴真的，按新的是哪个的？新的是哪个的？蒙古中国的话，我的新的是哪个的？我的中国的，那个是
And so, like in the Bodhisattva's way of life, of course, this is kind of detailed very clearly and beautifully. When it says that in a situation where you might be likely to start criticizing another person or insulting another person or using negative speech towards another person, stop and be like, if that thought arises, then you go, oh, just stop and be like a piece of wood. So it's kind of like that's one tactic. Be like a piece of wood. Don't allow the thought to develop into words.
我就是他就是修改这么意思的。你这个这里告诉就是米起了有个么的，你妈伊呢？米起了没呢？怕独家写个要嘛吧？那底下伊呢？internet 个告诉的 internet 个就是的，他们家email 他们就叫他，按这个 video clip 说呢，他怎么能切不接？怎么不用这个多？用这个多，用这个多。我大概就。不来拉布团呢，俺们没得根据去用这个，但是个上了要我马当了，这些如果接了别春节要我的多，要接了春节要的，伊呢就忙着如果别去当。
And Gemma says, yeah, in particular in this kind of a scenario, it's become much more of an issue these days than it was in the past. Usually in the past, unless you actually met somebody. You didn't have a chance to insult them or criticize them. But nowadays on the internet, whether it's emails or whatever medium we're using, it's so easy to kind of have the knee-jerk reaction to insult or to criticize something that comes up on our news feed or whatever else. And so it's something that we have to kind of really be aware of in a kind of much broader sense. And to kind of make sure that we counteract those tendencies that we have.
我这个他给这么的高，我就是他超越放下大的秘密，参见那的专辑，大家拉，这个地图打了，连接起，什么没有解释哪里是
？Verse number 18. Though you lack what you need and are constantly disparaged, are afflicted by dangerous sickness and spirits, without discouragement, take on the misdeeds and the pain of all living beings. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
要的，俺那个别草药碰的，他刚刚才用过药的，草药碰的，这天小概三句的人工啥也没有，人工三句的广大啥也没有，这天三句叫那三年搞的3个月还没有，他这个身边那说话叫嘛，身边来个往个，他这个东南那说话是鸟药吧，他这里刚刚这个，他怎么能药是么的药的，我他这里刚刚吃的，俺说的那毛毛用死我的，他管这么个玩，说来个。来个想法就，来牛个想法这一般子，俺那靠这个，家里这部用个有呢，对简单吃好的，俺这部的用不多，用，但我这里这，我这里用有螃蟹，那个他春节螃啥呀，多呀，但是他这里春节螃蟹，俺大多米呢，可是他过去呢，俺这个每个通州之上，每个根据之上，俺这个通州当上呢这，差不多，俺大家这些拿着，俺把这个说的。这个说的，他这个那差全部都在跑，俺跑呢，俺这个面具节春节买吧，给这春节要把那五节买吧，我打这个那的，俺大家那些个，俺呀，你妈伊拉说吧，这个呀，这个那吧拉说吧，到讲说，我打俺这家里那边呢，东安肯定是吃完伊呢，给干拿去，俺大家那些个这个本来那拿着了说吧。 미그 통조 제발라 소바다 동에 근데 제바 임바 이나야 다 동에 들라 마기 받지는 마대 받지 why me 스타디 제모 watch 오다 되게 그가 레비 제바도 미쳐봐 제바 취 미사와데 근데 임바 이사 다네 근데 레기 제부 그 녀고도 강에 도대 이네 제부 녀는 그 매와 차줘야 줘 오다 지금 렌젤 이제 숙제도 줘야 안에 딜라 때나 란다 레냐마 소수 주고 말에 레냐마 타이베 선제였다 타이베 선제 안에 대다 탐제 그 동에 워터 소수를 강에 저 워터 약시 들어 봐 아니 워터네 아니 대다 그 동에 그가 녜디 고쳐 봐쇼 삼로다에 오다가자 아니 동에 그 내 나서는 강에 가서 제가 녜디 고쳐 봐쇼 대다라 동에 뜨다 많이 와쇼 가제 소수를 강에 잡아대 잡아대 ninje ke kyula pechutaya da ran kasade shen chenzen ke an twingela pechutaya da what did chena ani what did chena ta ticha daga ne shen ge che 타입의 마게 심제 탐제 두개 건가 딱 예티 고쳐 봐쇼 대다 사제 동을 전에 안지 라마체레스 고마 토베 규리 주와쇼 상자 아니 소소가 지 야와사에 만거 다들 동에 요때 동행게见的 쳐 유요바제 见的 동에 연구 요때 야 야와 매바 말이 소소리 통마 매바 사회 야와 만고 요래 그 달로 가시 만고 요래 아니 다가네 생게 세 달라 사바에 만고 요래 아니 약자 디게티 다들 제부 미见的 마체 제부 연구 요 많이 왔대도 디게도 봐 심지실 와체 아니 심지실 다 가제 내가 타두게 아니 줄 와체 어디든지 또 되게 저와이나 아니 디 나가서 갱에 람도 캐스도 갱에 람도 캐스 어디든지 아니 자주 세백이 남네 디나시 지거 왔다 캐라 나라도야 아니 자주 세백에 저발라 아니 도나 유네 라마 체레스 나시 지긴 있어도 어떤 거가 남네 저와 켈링이나 다 디네시 제고래 수고 도와 어디
So this verse is detailing really that, in cyclic existence, since we are here, our encounters with suffering will be many and varied, no doubt about it. And indeed, all suffering sentient beings are in the same boat. That there's so many who are really short of enough food they have in the morning. They still don't know where their lunch is going to come from in the daytime, and in the evening. Again, no uncertainty with regard even the basic sustenance that they need to stay alive, and so these are common situations in the world today, and so we must be aware of this, and that in the kind of understanding also that because of our karma, it's very clear that we have so many negative causes laid down. On our mind stream over countless lifetimes since beginningless time, that our meeting with a bewildering array of suffering is something absolutely should be taken for granted, and that this is not just now, but this will be part of what my experience will be in the future as well. Still operating under the influence of karma and the mental afflictions. And that that is going to lead to people who are in this verse are critical of me, who are disparaging me, who are looking down on me. I will have to bear illness that arises due to these negativities. I will be in a situation where I have no help when I am sick, or even though I do have help when I am sick, I have no money to pay for medical assistance. And that whatever suffering that I encounter, I should have the right attitude with which to deal with it. And so saying one, suffering for me is inevitable. The kind of the variety of that suffering is kind of like infinite. So therefore, it kind of makes sense or behoves me to be able to cultivate a really smart attitude to be able to counter and to deal with that suffering, not if it arises, but when it arises. And so we move away from this kind of like victimization attitude of why me, when we meet with suffering, and saying, no, I know this is karma. That the two principles of karma of saying this I do not meet with result if I haven't created the cause, and if the cause has been created, it certainly does not disappear of its own accord. So therefore, this result of suffering that I'm experiencing has been something which has resulted from a negative cause that I created. And so we do two things with regard to that. We recognize, one, and that we have a responsibility for the suffering that we are experiencing ourselves, and two, that we also feel the pain of that suffering. It's very real, It's not something that we're kind of like denying or masking, because we have to really understand how all other sentient beings are also feeling the pain of their suffering now as well. And so once we gain an understanding of our own suffering in that way, then we have an understanding of what all other sentient beings are going through right now, right as kind of like we experience it now as well. And so we make that, therefore, that really strong aspiration, may all their suffering, the results of all their suffering, ripen upon me. And we try to do that as powerfully and sincerely as possible, because this is something that is essential to our developing love and compassion. And that also, it is also kind of really empowering and in energizing our whole attitude towards cherishing others. And so we're using these conditions to kind of like get closer to the state of Chenrezig, that we want to emulate Chenrezig, to be able to deal with suffering, transform that suffering just like Chenrezig. And so this is kind of like it's talking about taking negative conditions onto the path, and really being smart and being able to transform them onto the path. And it's also, we're aware that we have a great deal of virtue on our mind streams, not just negativity. And so we have that too. And so why not, let's dedicate that also for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And so we take on their suffering, we dedicate our virtue, so that they do not have to experience the results of their own negative actions, and that they will be able to benefit from the virtue that we dedicate to them. And so this is kind of our pledge, and our doing our best to emulate and do like Chenrezig would do.
네, 다디는 안에 소속의 가서도 저 미신나라 강에 나서 준 거라. 강에 나서 소속 니리 소속 미신나로 다 되네 집고서 마음에 무엇을 되나 마도나 소속 배나 차차바이나 배조 냠차 치네 내가 쇼리에 용거래 다가는 생겼다 가리네 용거와 가리네 용거와 다 지금 안에 총게 안에 총 냠차 치마 안에 총 야마도 와서 강에 제 용거다 나서봐 준 거라 나서봐 준 거라 다 되게 그가 자도 뭐 소설 나가려 요 말이 가서 무슨 레뉴게 생활지 임바 인자 요 말이 아니 근데 매도 다 근데 중앙에 소설 미세 나로라 다 가제 내 나살란도 와 아니 저기 가서 로경고 차내다 저기 수부 마 구이치마다 내 나사다 다가는 이제 타마 치외 바게 동에 근데 중앙에 봐 있나야 근데 중앙에 갑라 동네 지가 갑라 아니 거기 동네지 아니 가서 대다 최집에 튕겨를 배주다니 동네지 잠지 장주가 샘게 줄을 배주다니 동네지 랑기 닌제 맞게 맞게 깨와 권데 권도 배우치다 뭐된다 아 랑기 잡아 맞게 맞게 깨 권데 권도 배주다니 딱 이제 샘제 생기 다 대다 통화 나다 강에 차원나 이제 파이브 심제 먹고 되는 시간 이 강에가 얘도 고쳐 봐쇼 얘도 고쳐 봐쇼 나 강에 들을 때는 나와 있나다 시바 있나다 가르치는 내가 믿도 이 중앙에 아니 대다 탐대가 강에 세게 아니 굉장히 줄을 치마는 다 지금도 삼삼전 아니 나기 대화 되게 돼 팡센다 센나다 되게 가야면 맞잖아 대달 뭐하지 어디는 저 다디 계속 라레 있어 다디 그들 현재제 다디 되게 용문에도 차고요 다들 나라도 강에 되대 체대 카도 강에 되 체르데 카도 체게 유디 그래 쳐버스나 아니 란첸스 오고 용되게 되는데 준준아 소에들 지게 동에 지내 봐 대고 란데 되래 좀 지게나 동에 근데 좋아이나 란 대화 되네 란첸스 오고 용되 버렸어 지게나 디게 지내 봐 대화 지내 봐 제대 되래 좀 chen 디게 되네 되는 용되게 요래 다 뒤에서 다 라라 단다 동네 좋아데 란 디기 되네 란 첸스 오고 용되게 요나 아니 용되게 요마도 못쳐나 다데 손도 다 첸스 제 고츠니 고츠네 아니 파 셴랑 고아체 셴라 타마 주베 디체도 아니 마오바 되네 무트노 마요한다 내가 다다 수도 강에 쳐봤길래 루그 강에 요때 생기 강에 매와 차지야 생기 강에 매와 차 강에 매와 차봐 들라 때네 아니 루그 강에 야 리베 매와 차주야지 매와 차주야지 오다 간자 다 간자 거소를 저게 내 자차 먹고를 패게 매 싸치 무슨 차기 봐 어떻게 되잖아
So this life offers a bewildering array of sufferings that we will inevitably have to go through. A fantastic training ground. These sufferings are not just physical pain, disease, and illness, but indeed also like those who have been wealthy, losing that wealth, those who have had the security of a job, then suddenly losing that security, that job. And so there's a great deal of a great choice of suffering for us.
So 파마的病假的中国的在外有个这个安尼两把系统的，但刚刚那什么你不吧？刚刚那什么还是么样？
That's right. So we have our parents, our relatives, our friends getting sick, getting diseased, dying even. It's just once you even think about it for a short time, it's just a wide variety, bewildering variety of sufferings that are there for us. Now, the job for us, though, is to be able to transform that suffering into dharma, into spiritual practice, to use all of that suffering as much as we can to cultivate loving kindness, to cultivate compassion, to increase in every way and more that sense of the responsibility to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. That may our bodhicitta increase, may our cultivation of emptiness increase. So as much as possible. And so, an understanding, that sickness, disease, and death are absolutely inevitable. And so it's like when suffering arises, not if, that we should be able to put all of this into a practice. And the practice is to kind of really relate any sufferings that we have to all other sentient beings. So we can see that there is no kind of special exemption for any sentient being, that they all have to go through so much suffering. And so from our point of view, to increase our loving kindness and compassion, we really want to really develop this concept that may it all their suffering arise on me, ripen on me. I take it all on, all those problems, all that sickness and so on. And indeed, I don't regard my own issues as being problematic at all. I see that it's just another opportunity to take, the negative conditions onto the path. So it's a very courageous kind of attitude that we have. And that we recognize also, as kind of Shantideva pointed out in the Bodhisattva's way of life, that all of what occurs to me in a negative sense is as a result of my own self-cherishing. I cannot get beyond that. I can't get past that. That it is my own selfishness that has led to whatever, suffering that arises from me now. And so this has been the case from countless lifetimes since beginningless time. And I've just let it go like this. And so it's really high time that I take a better, more enlightened attitude to all of that. And that means really centering on developing loving kindness, compassion, and the importance of others in order to cherish all other sentient beings. And so that means like I take on their suffering that it may ripen upon me. I take my own virtue, and without any regret whatsoever, I dedicate that completely and freely to be a benefit all sentient beings, so that they may be established in real happiness. And that that my suffering and my is a result of my self-cherishing, that I can reassess that and use it so that I become closer to behaving in the same way as an enlightened being like Chen Lezig, and that I adopt this unbreakable determination to be able to see life in that light, to see every suffering as a golden opportunity to cherish others and to develop my loving kindness and compassion. And so whatever suffering or pain that arises for me physically, there will be no mental suffering accruing from that. I will be free from that. And so I'll be able to still operate and to dedicate all of that. So it's kind of like really gaining like more subtle understanding of the suffering of all other sentient beings, and therefore more genuinely take on all their suffering. And that recognizing this mental mind training like this is actually the best possible medicine.
네. 답변은 뭐서 뭐유기 내주 신배团에 아니 냠내 제고로 뭐유기 내서도 근데 제바이네 배나 뭐서 지금 저모라서 미살 김자라서 좀 그래 좀배 타마지 제도래 코칭이 다가네 제 주자라 있네 사사사사 타마지 마 내가 찾고 그래 아니 야 깨모스는 야 깨배 타마지 시조해야 돼 다가 상제게 쭉 근데 지금바이나 타마 구베 뒤도요 나라도 최대 튕게 근데 지금바이나 타마 내가 찾고 그래 구베 뒤도 다다 저기 소소단다 수고 대보 요래 남자 대보 매가 찾고 그래 다 체르보리 대주 주나 거기 춘이래 다 된대 중에 갑라 내 나타다 수고 구요에다 다가데 아니 지금 밴조다 차제 되게 내가 찾고 왔다 아니 미기 구셔도 찍고 잡아 되게 당부 여봐자 그래 매가 찾고 다들 모두 혹할 올라 마셔 뭐기 받지고 요때 뭐기 비지고 참라 아니 지금 다들 나시 전에 아니 지금 가서 동랭이 미과자고 되게 삼로 땅바이나 되게 땅바이나 이 모두를 두 가지 연구 용화대 최초에 통계를 배주 땅도바이나 미닝골 잡으라 용어는 용그래 다 용화 뭐기바 제바 대바이나 아니 모두에 동해 용의 유튜브 저거 와 다지 뭐기바 지주 참라 이 아니 지금 가서데 생기 동해 그 출래现这个团的，俺那rangi，俺这个叫我啥吧这个的，写了我钱呢，俺那这个说的现这个团的我钱呢，写了票把就这里这样子，rangi刚才的3件我把准备给你就了说的，第二天呢，俺那这个사람네 차라고 봐도 아니 뒤지기 통제 주에 가서는 대화 탐제 현재 말했잖아요. 연구요도 아니 뒤주도데 내가 나 찾아봤는데 쌤 강에 그때 처벌 쌤 시대전에 내도에 딜라 때는 아니 소소게 루땡게 동에 대 숙청도 줘야 아니 다들 세리 돈에 셔봐이나 잠바다 닝제대도 이문 시스템 야제 단 것도 쓰기도 와 아니 진짜나 수고 마대바이네 대다 줘야다 아니 중계에서 야고 매원 중계 야도 줘야라 아니 그 에너지도 연구를 와 니버도 연구를 와 이것도 다 초시 3개는 좀세 뭐네 삼었다한테 오호 뭐도 디기 거고 요래 동네 거고 요 말이 아니 디기데 그 리크베 저거 연구 요 왔다 춤에 판에 줘야 다 개치셔 좀 생각도 잘 와.
So our actual situation, this is again like we take a kind of 2020 view on our actual situation in this reality, in this world. We can see from our own experience how, everything that is gathered will be dissipated eventually. Everything that is accumulated by us will be lost eventually. That all that goes, rises up will eventually come down, and this is the actuality of the situation, because we live in a contaminated reality, and that the only kind of end result of that is a sense of deterioration, one way or another. And this is this life, that however healthy we are now, ultimately we become unhealthy. This is the nature of reality of this situation. That if we have wealth one day we will lose that wealth. That we know all this, we see all this, we're exposed to all this on a constant basis. Now, what must we take from this? One is that, of course, we must avoid getting depressed because of this, or feeling in a negative way about life because of this. But we see what can be gained from this. And this is where the taking and giving practice comes into its own. And that here, if we use all of this suffering, all of this situation, all of this reality to engage and to enhance our spiritual practice, then we're onto a winner. And here it makes our life really meaningful, which is really what it's all about. Inevitably, that the suffering is inevitable. What we need to do is to be able to approach that suffering, deal with that suffering, and transform it into true happiness, into the causes of the true happiness. And that, the virtue arising from that as well, we dedicate that forward to all sentient beings as well. And so this problem, whatever the problem is, I am determined to transform it into a cause for enlightenment, a cause for the increase in my in love, increase in my compassion, increase in my mind enlightenment. And that to understand that if I'm able to do this, I am, really establishing the kind of the well-being of my own future by doing so. And that after all, we want happiness. This is what it's about. I want, happiness. We need happiness. I do not need suffering. And so what's being suggested here is that this is such an important question. These are such important questions that we need to approach from many different points of view, and to look into what really establishes true happiness, and what can really eradicate the suffering for us. And so this is why, with the mind training approach here is so profound and so emphasized. And as we know now as well, not only that we have our future looked after, but in the meantime, we have a peace of mind in this life as well. And even the science is starting to back up the cultivation of love and so on, as saying it's something that really benefits our own immune system. And so there's further reasoning to support being able to develop as much loving kindness and compassion as we possibly can. It gives us, fresh energy in our own dealings. And so this is the point here, to transform the inevitable negative conditions onto the path. It's kind of like we really have no choice, because the suffering is inevitable. So we either take this enlightened attitude, or we slip into something which is much more debilitating and depressing. And so this is something that can really transform our life in this life, making it meaningful, but also laying down, like we said, the foundations for our well-being in future lives.
我的大概我的钱呢，大概这个总之要我三路当嘛伊呢，总之要我三路当伊呢，大概3月的他前了票吧主要3个月的，也主要的少数的地区用的中国多，但是在这人不签个可是的300线的，他先个多3个月的，按照让个多的下了中国的是，是吧？3月的先个多3个月的是。and then the dedication to the teacher to Chigo Yorte, and then Rangi Dirty, Shola Yonti Yoris. So, side effects and yoga.
So, like when we really look into the reasons here and the reasoning behind this, we can see that the emphasis on benefiting others leads to our own happiness, our own well-being. As J. Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa also made the same point, emphasizing this, that when we work with the mind to benefit others, our own benefit is looked after as a side effect. It's a side effect of that. So this is kind of the ultimate formula, really.
아니 다 강에 채워도 아니 마치 왔던 때나 거기기 그 처음부터 마치 왔던 때도 아니 강에 그 마치 왔지 여기라 아니 소소 삼로 당당기 판에 아니 강에 숙차서 되기도 강에 숙차서 되기도 아니 들라들 다 동네 대발 봐 지금 여기를 엑스트라 동네 줘 되기도
Likewise, we can see when we can't or don't adopt the mind training, the transformative thinking that is being suggested here, that when we encounter problems and we don't have a mindset to really transform them, and then we are unhappy because of the problem, but also then our own thinking add extra unhappiness onto that. It's like, it's doubling down on our unhappiness, so that we have the pain of the suffering, and then we add extra pain onto that in our mental attitude towards it. So we can see really that the choice is quite stark, isn't it? That you either want double suffering or you work towards transforming that suffering completely.
아니 남이 편전에는 마찬가지 자기도 아니 좋았다 아니 타마타마도 누가 전에 수사이지에다 아니 전에 창동 거에다 아니 다 간자 독자 먹고 용되기도 아니 잡스다데 배주 땅 거에 다 간자 먹어야 먹고지 용고야지 자기도 다 간자 삼로 땅다지 너르온데 다 강에 세게 릭투베지 삼로 마다 릭투베지 중마도나 아니 릭투베지 레오데 아니 강에 태바 중데 중고도 와다 디가 가서데 나라도 들 가서데 디가 그가 나라도 그 뇽알 파자 하고다 통해도 와 뉴스다 가와가왔다 통해도 와
So we can see when incorrect thinking is applied to problems, that it not only doesn't do anything to overcome the problem itself, but it can add a whole plethora of extra problems on top of that. For example, when we fail to overcome a difficulty because of our own thinking, applying incorrect reasoning or incorrect thinking to it, that the problem is not dealt with, but then we lose our own peace of mind. And so that starts that can often, and we see a knock-on effect because of that discontentedness in our own mind, that we need to drink alcohol to mask that, take drugs to mask that, and some people kind of drives them to the ultimate extreme of suicide because they have no proper thinking to deal with their problems. And so there's so many kind of unnecessary extra suffering that comes from applying incorrect thinking to the problems that we encounter. And this is not something that you need to be told. We all have experience of this ourselves. Plus, we see it played out night after night on the news. And so it's something that is very, very common.
다른 거죠. 다른 뉴스다 이런 착바다 되바다 욕자 강가 아니 지금 세 마디와 되는 용도도 도나치다 세 마디와 되는 용도 세버래 오다가 이제 왔다 되게 된 것도 뭐죠 다 소소 강에 동안에 용거래 용하지 아니 지금 잡아도 이제 기회다 다가니 이제 상계 줄라 저의 배출 땅도 아니 내게 동네 소소를 팬도서 때도 디게를 팬도서 아직 전에야고
So we can see, like, can't we, on the news and through the newspapers and so on, any kind of media, we can see so much kind of like suffering and problems that are emphasized. And that's just, when we kind of even get a kind of a precursory details regarding the story behind these problems, we can see that inevitably it begins with a discontented mind state. And so this is kind of like where it all begins, in even this news that we come across. So if we are able to contribute something different, a different approach, whereby we able to see the reality, the actuality of problems and difficulties as something inevitable because of the reality that we're in. And therefore, we have set up a different mind state, a different approach to being able to understand them, deal with them, ultimately transform them into something which is beneficial for other sentient beings, for ourselves. How wonderful is that? How good is that?
다 계속 다니 전부게 아니 저기 가서 줘봐도 그다 되게 된가 아니 되는 남의 지그래 아니 가라서 계속 다니 전보다 좀 맞지 소소 제대로 여봐이나 어디 되는 시 삼을 당고래 수도 어디 다 되는
And so, of course, in these verses, what we're saying that this is the advice handed down from great beings of the past. They found this to be, maximum benefit to themselves, and so we ought to take this to heart itself and say, this is advice that I need to put into practice. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
계속 전주 서만의 생계 아니 냠네 제도바 다기 지기 대다 제노버쇼 제노바데 라마체르스게 징글랍도서 소데 자발도 라마체르스 콜레 두선한 거 외세들 규인바로 토마메바 디바데 디바지 케바도야 아니 대대 냠네 제도게 아니 누바 케바자 아니 중소 선도 바자 샤소 선도 들 고바시도는 야고요 어디죠.
And so that to have the power to be able to reason correctly, apply correct thinking with regard to the inevitable problems that I encounter. May I be able to do this? I will be able to do this. I will kind of like do my best to be able to do this. So Guru Chenrezig, please bless me that I may be able to do this. As a result of this sincere supplication, countless light rays emanate from the heart center of Chenrezig that we are visualizing in front. With the light rays, the white light rays predominant entering into my crown, flowing through my body and mind, purifying all negativities and obscurations that have accumulated since beginning this time, and all obstacles to my being able to really integrate this kind of thinking as something which is part and parcel of my mind state from now on. And then the light rays, the golden in predominant, giving me like the power, the potential, the power to fulfill my potential to be able to do this.
어디를 공부하시는 어디를 가장 초청 셋업 아니 삼로 단계야 어디를 좀 되고 다 소소 로로 저는 어디를 로로 다 문에 전에 밥을 다 좀제 먹고 삼도 우리 전에 어디 뒤부터 저 삼도 삼도 좋아 어디 뒤는지 어디 제일 강에 제대로 어디 되는데 제도가 쇼서 순대제 주제 밥자체 아니 소소가 강tum도 그 제게 배준체 다 송제 손에 줘야 돼 어디는
So this is the the setup here that when you go through the verses, we know the reasoning behind why what is being said that we can say reach that point of conclusion ourselves that, oh my goodness, yeah, this is the way it has to be done. This is the way I must integrate. There's no other choice. And so when we reach that point of, really strong conviction, then we make our supplication to the merit field, the figure of Chen Wezi. Please send blessings so that I will be able to put this into action and to do the very best I can to integrate this into my life from here on in. And so we kind of gain that sense of an emotional assurance from the blessing as well to back up what we have concluded through reasoning.
Nyamba tashan trauma chibi tu namte buyi kaso noja tokyo cha sibe penjo ningbo mesi ne ana kengba meba chise.
Verse number 19. Though you become famous, then many bow to you, and you gain riches to equal Vaishravanas. See that worldly fortune is without essence, and don't be conceited. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
다가제 튼제 매바 임바이나야 튼제 매발 툼베 튼제 매바 디게티 아니 가서데 다가제 로슈미에다 마기바 차야다 데데 줄라 마다 왔체네 아니 쳇집에 튼제라 베리다 다 튼제 푸소서바 디바이나야 야 딜라테네 아니야 야 너무 계기야 뭐가 먹고 열마 그거 너무 열마 다 되네 이제 아니 그거디 생활도 마다 왔체 이 온도 마다 왔체네 로다 랑이 다 튼제 디게 요거 맞아 왔체 다 개치 라 튼제 디 요거 찬데 대바이나 튼제 디 말이 차버와 아니 쳐요 말해 튼제 디게 랑이 요거 소트 왔체 랑 제다 제네 아니 디 가서래 튼제 디게 최주베 튼제를 배주 당도 왔체 좋아 아디자 그 튼제 유 메시게데 최 객 말해 최기 객군에데 랑이 삼모당다는 맛이 봐이나 아니 최기 객 차기도 최기 객 차기도 최기 객 도모도서 랑라 튼제 매바 좀 되게 최 제마도 봐 랑라 튼제 유베 좀 되게 최 제마도 봐 되게 가야 말 랑게 튼제 여바다 매바 니가 최집에 튼제를 배주 땅도다 맞게 아니 최 제도로 다 맞도 잡아봐
So this verse is discussing really how we must, the view with which we must hold our possessions and what we have in terms of conditions, standard of living, I suppose. And it's pointing out here that, that often two scenarios create major obstacles for engaging in spiritual practice. One is when we don't have anything, and so we don't have anything, so we're depressed, we're unhappy, we have this kind of victimization, why me attitude, so we don't ever think about engaging in spiritual practice. The other is when we are really well off, and so we have like a really high standard of living. Now, the problem is the attachments that we have, the mental afflictions that come into the mind there about, oh, I must have this, I must have that, I'm in competition with somebody else, and so on. And so, therefore, you're far too concerned with maintaining and increasing your wealth to engage in spiritual practice. And so here we need to counteract both these extremes by adopting an attitude that is able to sustain our dedication to spiritual practice regardless of whether we have or we have not. And so this is very, very important. And so here we must not allow our own, wealth or lack of it to make us a slave. We must not become a slave to having nothing, or a slave to allowing our wealth to make us a slave to it, And so again, it's about maintaining control of our lives regardless of our standard or quality of life. Here, it's kind of like saying we must use the lack of wealth, and we must use the presence of wealth for our spiritual practice and become skillful into being able to integrate both into our spiritual thinking. And so this is the point here. Regardless of whether you have or have not, you are skilled and aware to use both situations to enhance your spiritual practice.
그래. 그런 거 저게 릭지게 다 최제 최제면도서 최제 좀 되게요. 릭지게 최주발라 가야 과요 말했으네. 답에 가서 가야 과요 말했으네. 아니 되게 그가 여바디가 녀몽기 그랬으네. 시그저 릭지녀도 이나야 개 치슈데 시그 전제 여바다 매바디게데 니가 전제를 줬으게 개를 줬으게 군인이 이네 다 개치 간사 포란기 전제 문에데 간사 포란기 최다 좀 삼로 땅 도마도라 라리기 와 최주베 전제 문에데 간사 포란기 최다 좀 삼로 땅에데 아니 축구 요구도 와 최다 좀 삼로 땅단이 신고도 와 안 디시마데 아니 가서데 다가자 가서데 단다 가서 심마데 다가자 지금 다다데 가서데다 지금 최종의 셋업, 삼종의 셋업, 검종의 셋업, 되게 아니 통계 약보 상황 있나? 시 통계 여다 몇 되게 개체 뭐 말해. 되게 여바데 최주의 통계를 배주 당 두그래. 매바데 최주의 통계를 배주 당 두고 디니니가 용두고 와. 최도 송마소데 랑젠제다 뇽몬바게 카텔라 도다 마토다 라리기 와. drada matter rale ta did get mo di ngocho waina ani ngocho beto na nyame chebana cheju be tenge changsha dimena tenge changmodu oda dige de ngoto gasa da ka de she ko eti keja di she ba ina ani tenge yabo chunga iba na yabo chunga de ani nyomo kewe jula ma iba de cheju be tenge la peju ta ya tenge meba ina meba dige ke ani ma kiba je nyomo ke na ma de ba ti nyomo pa 라제 심지어 탐정의 녀모 바에게 아니 줄을 배주 당도야지. 네가 이들이 깨지기도 와. 어디르셔.
So we see here it's a mental attitude that needs to be established, and this is what it comes down to, because you can have for example people who have are poverty-stricken or nothing, they can make the excuse, I can't engage in spiritual practice, I'm too busy trying to make a living, stay alive, etc. And then for those who have riches, they claim they don't need religion, they don't need spiritual practice, I have everything I need, I couldn't be bothered doing this. And so here, again, we can transform these two possibilities into better ways of thinking that are more beneficial, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. And so here, it's a question of whether we're using our situation to create conducive conditions for practice, or whether this situation is going to be an obstacle for our practice. And it's kind of like down to the individual, the person, and their thinking as to whether they have and they can use what they have to enhance their spiritual practice, or they don't have and they can use their situation of not having to increase their spiritual practice, to enrich their spiritual practice. And we can see from that personal point of view that a person is able to elicit wisdom arising from learning, from contemplation, and from meditation, in order to make the wise choices and to understand what is a line of action or thinking which is based on self-cherishing, self-grasping point of view, and what is a line of thinking and action based on developing loving kindness and compassion, the more enlightened point of view. And so here, it's a question of saying that if I have, then I can use what I have to benefit others, to benefit my own well-being and so on, by developing the positive qualities, and I have the conducive conditions to be able to do this in an effective way. If I haven't, then I can use that situation, that scenario to say, I can do what I can to benefit others, and also I can work very well here to avoid mental affliction. And so there's a kind of an emphasis that can be given in both situations that is kind of like the mind training of taking the best out of whatever situation you find yourself in. And this is the mark of a wise. People have learned from the wisdom of the situation to make the wisest choices.
네, 다가제 지금 작 전부 전에 배다 지금 가서 개발에서 나와 있네 다가제 지금 수야보도 나와 있네 다가제 벤조 전부 나와 있네 다가리 내면은 아니 지금 미용소 미망부 지금 가부치 사지 엔베 년다 전부 년다 예배 작게 정말 아니 미 망부 시부 지금 아니 고샵 지구 제사 있죠 배 대대다 아니 벤조게 아니 배 지금 가서 하이 and because the you la pet to it today you were in that this to nas mig to get the tagaswa nas mig penjo chambos the tagas to weg hata to get the penjo to hasa what not to say any pet you know la to it today put up you got the big penjo chachabo what the top in a top you down top in a ya and to get the ganga kaso because 데데 시베게 근데 그래서 시베게 벤조 되게데 아니 님보 매봤으나 데데 지기라 고콘에 대바 이나 무트네 딱까지 코알라 코데 무트네 딱까지 동네 속에 나데 쇼데 동네 교회 잡아 주제가 동네라서 봐 다가자 지금 가서데 어떻게 다 토스전에 원남이가 봐도 다 코데 얘기 아니 지금 어떻게 질 제도 어떻게 또 문에 전에 님보 싸워지는 매대 님보 매봤 시그네 딜레 타베 아니 탐제케는 고마치 뚝뚝마치에 진짜라베 디 탐제케바 뒤에 튕겨를 배줬다면서 딜라 고코네 이 상황도 좋네 아니 다 간자 지금 아니 지금 캥바체를 다 쉬우도 예 또가 배 규축슈예 나 미쿠샵 치슈예 아다가 공자 치슈예 데레라 고코 마데바체네 다 간자 지금 가서데 고코 마데바체네 다가제 지금 가서도 고마도 하고 왔잖아요. 다가제 아니 지금 생바 매봤잖아요. 다가제 지금 셈제 수이만에 들어 구바도 쓰고 있잖아요. 다가제 지금 현진지 게다제 란진지 수수도 다 있잖아요. 다가제 어디에 있잖아요. 다가제 생바 매봤지에 다가제 지금 가서도 다가제 지금 계속 자주 처벌 속에 아니 데스 냠줄랑 데스 내 고콘이 되고 말했어. 근데 고콘이 되게도 다가제 패바치 가사 패바 차와 가바체도 딱한테 셰드 두테 파자 랑게 두마도 더 파다 어떻게 요구를 쓴 거야 어떻게 아니 청바보 와데 계속 라레스 청바 내가 계속 라레스 어떻게
삼천 배바 하나 그서디
셈제 다 로다 셈제 탐제가 돈도 다 셈제 샬라 가서도 다 가제 지금 현진지전 다가데 현진지전은 타이버 마기스면 저기 변 주비했지 말려 맞지 타이버 마기스면 탐제기 변 주비했지 아 개체 못지 데데지라 주자라 구셔 시고 데데지라 고파고 왔지 엔 되게 타이버 마기스면 탐제기에는 줄을 배주 당투 전개를 배주 당투했지 이 상황도 뭐든 나시 좀 있어 아니 지금 가서도 뽑았지 아니 샬라 통동지에 최수지에 데데 고마고 왔잖아 되게 그가 아니 지금 가서도 가세 미국 고셔 차치나 되게 셈젤 시gur 쳐다 줘야 가세 벤조 야 쳐다 되게 셈젤 시gur 쳐다 줘야 아 전제 가세 되게 그가 쳐주면 셈젤 배주다 또 다가자 가세 전제 좋아 이네 다다데 로초 시게마를 당보들 소원에 단 셈젤 감자를 이신 노볼 내라고 도저 주면서 따도 잡을 쓰면 쇼 오다들 가세게 실로게 전제 가세 미국 고셔 시gur 가세 잡아 이네 아니 랑게 로초가 냠내를 숙쳐다 숙차 냠내 제투했지. 숙차 냠내 제투했지. 어떤데 저도 계속 줘버렸어. 이 상황도 만들어졌다. 다 주자라 미스구로 구셔. 이 상황도 저래. 애들은 고코는 대화 이나. 나 너무 개줘래. 캥바 요구로 와. 나 심지어 삼삼. 지지대 아니 샬라 통종 다 먹고 요구도 와.
So as the verse is pointing out here, though you become famous, that, or you gain riches and so on. Here, or indeed you incredibly fit body, or in some way you become like distinguished in some sense. Here, that we must be very careful in thinking like this. Even if other people have tremendous respect for you and hold you, put you on a pedestal and so on, one has to be incredibly careful here. And so one way is to look upon even the comparison that in the desire realm, celestial being realms, we have the very rich, like Vaishra Varnas points to here. So you may be, that rich. You may think you're that rich, even though there's really no comparison. That here, from the bodhisattva's point of view, we must look upon all of this as kind of like something which is essenceless. That these conditions, that we have, though they are very conducive in a material sense, they, if we are not careful, are simply going to keep us revolving in cyclic existence in a state of self-deception. And so here is, rather than us kind of like putting a great emphasis on having these conducive conditions for material wealth and so on, we need to have an attitude towards all sentient beings where we are operating out of respect for them, and we need to really do everything we can to diminish the self-cherishing attitude, and everything we can to uphold and to increase the attitude which cherishes others. And so this is very, very important, that if we find ourselves in a so-called fortuitous state in this world with the kind of material possessions, that we don't use it to discriminate between ourselves and the ones who are like me, who have, and the ones who don't have. And so looking down on any other group. And so that sort of discrimination is very, very important to avoid, and to kind of like really only ever see our conditions as conducive conditions for being able to more effectively engage in spiritual practice, to increase my love and kindness and compassion, to increase my living enlightenment. And so this is, and to kind of like, as the mind training texts say, to view all other mother sentient beings as even greater than a wish fulfilling gem. And so here it's a very, very important to use what we have to increase the power of our practice, and so not to act in any conceited sense, and to discriminate because of it. So it's very, very important that, in fact, from a spiritual practitioner point of view, when one has to be more careful not to lose our bodhicitta, our mind of enlightenment. And so that is kind of like one of the main considerations in kind of like our conducive material conditions. And thereafter, then, once you establish that, then emphasis is on using those conditions to be more powerful and benefit to others.
그 산제 좀 되게 제와 남다다가 되다고 되다 다가라리 그래서 냐바 산제 좀 되게 개비세레 아니 세고 요래 튕게 요래 고샵 요래 강가 요래데 아니 규찰라다 되게 강가 튕게 찬데 요래 거기 되게 요래데 디니부 메바시네 이다 니부 메바시네 아니 킹바 메바체네다 계속 좀 알람 해봐라 그래다.
So indeed, the prime example for this comes from the life of the Shakyamuni Buddha, as he demonstrated himself, having been royalty and as a kind of an automatic person to be respected with all wealth and pomp and ceremony and so on associated with royalty at that time. He saw all of that as essenceless. And then it shows the life of a wandering meditator to reach the truth. So it's kind of very important that we take that example ourselves as well, and not to be fooled in our own wealth, but to use in the wisest possible way.
되게 그걸 캥바 매바치다 나랑주 체도 로주 가와라서 받지 다 같이 되게 걸 려당나잖아 되게 고마고로 왔지 고마고 왔지 되게 굿바이 랍체 아니 다 나랑주 체도 다 로주 가와라서 받지 아니 저거를 맞숨라서 받고네 다 단다야 뭐 니도 두개 하우스 두고 요 단다야 아니 간도 지시 말아
And you can see also the results of Buddha taking that stance of kind of saying, this is essenceless. All of this stuff, all of this materialism is essenceless. There is kind of something far more important to attain than wealth. So he kind of like said goodbye very dramatically in that sense, as you remember. And then eventually, got returned to Wheel of Dharma 3 times and established this amazing tradition, the benefit of which is still very much here with us today.
그래, 다들 타입에 심지어 규모도 미모 좋아지, 심지어 장래 때부터 논의도 두개리라. 단대는 모두는 얘기래. 딱 이제 전부리 미셔요 그세야 때 집에 저게 상계 좀 될 때마다 모두는 얘기래. 그래서 그 시요 가서 야제 집에 저게 뭐 안에 가서 좀 잘 예바슈 쳇 얘기래. 뭐다 가자 간제 지금 어디에 대대게 산제티 주는 도도데 대대 청계 도도로 고관이 좋아이나 다 청계 지금 매번 차사를 봐. 매번 차사래. 아니 한도 가야 좀 맞아.
So we can see, we know the story of the Buddha from 2,600 years ago, and that the benefit that he initiated and established is still strong today, and that this teachings as well. He's kind of like those. The more education that we have as human beings, the more the veracity of what the Buddha taught is established. We can see that it's because it's based on reasoning as well. And that we can take 2 stark facts from the life of the Buddha in that all of what he left behind, the kind of unfounded, the riches of royalty and so on, what is there left of that now? Nothing, completely gone. And yet the benefit that the Buddha initiated through that one of his decisions of leaving all that behind, that's all still very live and still extremely beneficial to modern sentient beings nowadays.
다 뒤도 상계 좀데 주는 돈주기 다 주는 돈주기 이거 렌토 매바 이나 아니 다 주는 돈주니 매바 차도 그래 아니 디게부 게치 디게 매바 차 그거 매바 차도 이거 가야려 그다 디게 그거 보고 당기다 그래 봐 지금 거 막으러 왔지 아니 가서 거 막고 왔지 다 가지 계속 그 제발 남래 제발 인사 뒤다다요 뭐다 돼
So it's really saying that all of this business of royalty, of wealth, of the accumulation of possessions and so on is truly, truly essenceless. It's something that cannot lead to, anything other than being essenceless. And so what is pointing to is that the adoption of, for example, mind training texts like the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva here is what really counts. There is essence in these practices, and we can integrate them into our lives.
다다 상계 좀데 신우 두두 개부종 아니 수사도 아티 이나 메나 대좀 사사서 다 사도 도마게 무도와 그요 말이야 그래로 아까 남지나 가야 매바 차도라고 가야 매바 차도 그래 이나야 지가서 계속 좀 하려고 무슨 개만에 개배 봐도 내 이거 그러라 아쉬워.
So what if 2,006 years ago, with this person born as a prince to a royal family in Magda, was not to have made a decision to leave? What would be left of his legacy and memory now? Absolutely nothing. We wouldn't even know the name. But because of that decision, many decisions made by the Buddha and establishing the teachings and so on, turning the wheel of Dharma, that his memory, let alone his memory, but all of the teachings and so on have survived from generation to generation, from century to century, right up till today.
다 딜라더네 나라서 그 주자라다 다 가서
And so, so the point is that all of our stuff then, all of our possessions kind of like is really pointless, isn't it? Really? There's no essence in that either.
Only up shop inside matching days.
Yes, yes, only good for the up shop. And so, yes, only what's inside here is kind of pointing to what's really important. How our thinking is important. How we're thinking. So we leave it there for today. And so really, the takeaway from today is that the most important thing is through our recognition of the kind of the reality as pointed out in these verses, that we do our very best to integrate them, to practice, to really make them part and parcel of our every, how would you say, part and parcel of our everyday life.
Yeah, and 다가서 나라쪽에 지금 가서도 지금 지게디 튕게디 그것도 고고요. 얘네 딜라 고커트네 아니 셔츠에 객 맞아. 이 셔츠에 튕게요 맞아. 저도나 아니 meaningful 잘 봐.
And of course it's also we must point out that of course we need certain basic conditions in order to be able to live in this world. That's of course clear. But what we need to assure is that we don't become a slave to those conditions, that they don't become an obstacle to our practice, but rather they become a conducive condition to enhance our practice.
아니 지금 가서 상해 근데 좋아 임바 있나야 상다 예 근데 좋아 임바 있나야 아니 지금 셈제 돌아 편도 유근체 대체도 아니 지금 자주가 셈 맞아와 게 권도 되다 란체제 마시도 축축도 충도 줘야 현재제 아니 권도 패니 아니 지금 가서 달라마 제레스 투교는 요번에 신제다 현재제 아니 게 투에 게트라 지말 게트바 다게 지기 대다 젠노바도 다가자 라마체레스게 징글랍도 소와트스 코바셰.
So we bring our mind to focus on the figure of Chen Rezig in our merit field, and we start to make our strong supplication, that this kind of thinking of whatever happens for us and whatever our conditions are, whether good or bad, that we are in the strength of our thinking able to turn them towards the benefit of others, towards the development of the mind of enlightenment, that it may increase and increase more and more and more, and that our own self-cherishing attitude is kind of reduced as much as possible again and again and again, and that is changed, that is swapped for our attitude whereby we're cherishing others more and more and more. How wonderful it would be if I could do this. And may I be able to do this? I will do this. Chen Rezi, please bless me to be able to cultivate all of these beautiful noble attitudes in my mind and become more and more like you.
And 타와지 마중아이나 다 모두네 다 동에 녀대지도 다 동에 아니 전제 또서만 전제가 삭제 이 동에 뭐 주도 그래서 동에 교회 동에 잡아 주제 그 동에 숨지 지난에 잡아 주제 그 동에 빠마도 하나 모두네 동에 녀대지 잡아 주제 동에 빠마도 한테네 아니 가서 다 가지 가서 동에 교회 동에 얘기다 그 대제하고도 와 아니 모두네 다 지금 가서 동에 녀대지고도 와 아니 동에도 다 가자 지금 아니 가서다 다 가지고 这个说的，恰把对这个东西的马帮把多，他刚才恰把对这个东西的马帮把多，我就带着自己用买对，你快乐也不住呢，可以自己肯定是嘛，呢，他国家当个人呢都没得快乐，呢就跟个，他刚才这呢就一个，他刚才想法都啥的多，想法都啥，你这了这个东西哪做想法不的，想法是那个说的，他管着我。
啊，那是，
他把想法谁说？最大的是什么？就应该他把的路应该就要不多，要的大的觉得他个嘛吧？我的想法那些，想法的他的嘛的，他个说的，他把这个的那么价格没是差不多，想法的那找，但是他也没这个说多，那光靠你那，但是这来年吧住呢，过来年吧住呢，但年吧住年终就上当，这来马上确实也没特别读这个仓那些，他感觉。这年嘛，就是我在那公巴县呢，年不准年终这是公巴县，在这年终年不准年终落地呢，他说的干嘛怎么就说寂寞了，我得等多，当个这的，大概在这甚至他的3届公巴主任是俺爹，这个他接吧接上就让给落地俺这边，让那输的这边，这类先把这边，把再就的。大概这个你就是么多，大概就什么啦，把大什么这么多买这个去，这买你把大概什么下呢？你什么落地，你没经过去就说什么，但有的那么就把印象，他主要的，有些真的出发的用的就，甚至他这个都能的，3届恐怕就这么一了，3届恐怕差不多了，真的印象，在这个当年也落地了点呢。落地了点呢，大概在这个他把的情况的连接的，就是也把确的出来清楚了。但我呢，可是越拖越去。这甚至他这3届恐怕嘛，都他们都把这个上这个落地一个，这个落地大概经过这个就说上去。这个你把这个那么人不这大概9百的，这里就故事图故事这都现在这300个是拍，200个是修，400个是政治，3届恐怕嘛，到不得那么解释个当。让你经过了念书，接触书，说是不行。
And so then in focusing on renunciation and understanding how, that we are in this reality of continued suffering, whether it's the suffering of change, or indeed pervasive suffering, particularly that state of pervasive suffering, where all this kind of the contamination reality of psychic existence means that until we overcome the pervasive suffering, we're still going to be suffering in psychic existence, because the suffering of change are induced by pervasive suffering. And so this is something that kind of in a way we have to see ourselves as really bound in psychic existence, tied down like with really brutal chains, where we're really imprisoned like that and incarcerated and tied down with chains in psychic existence. And so we have to recognize what a debilitating situation we're in, where we're prone to the 3 types of suffering like this constantly. And so we have to develop this attitude of really wanting to gain liberation, to gain a definite emergence from this state of reality. And from that really heartfelt attitude, the lotus representing renunciation is established on our crown, the 8-petaled lotus. And then this eye seeking to attain that liberation, we look into the reality of that self or that I, searching for that objectively existent self in the body, in the mind, and really coming to the point of the mere, to kind of seeing it as not finding what we're looking for, the mere negation of that, and realizing that such an I is kind of merely imputed. And that realization brings forth the sun representing the sun disk mandala on top of the lotus representing the wisdom. And then that what's inferred in that lack of objective existence, establishing that all phenomena therefore must be objectively not have any objective existence. Therefore, they must arise in dependence upon, for example, causes and conditions. And this allows for the cultivation of a spiritual mindset. And this allows us to take that to its nth degree, to attain that mind of enlightenment, to be able to, because it verifies the law of cause and effect, the state of enlightenment itself. And so therefore, we can attain that mind of enlightenment or Chitta, and that establishes the Mudisk mandala seat on our crown. Then we can invite the figure of Chenrezig to come to take that seat, or glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moonseed place on my crown, keep me safe from your kindness, bestow on me the attainments of body, spirit, and mind. At the end of the first recitation, the replica of Chenrezig emanates and starts the journey across. At the end of the second, arrives and seats himself on our crown. And at the end of the third, we have the assurance that the figure of Chenrezig and the enlightened Chenrezig will remain with us until we ourselves attain enlightenment.
我的这，这我的那是我打3年过嘛，都结束，但要不修就说算了，我打吃了不是结束，说是的，我的那过不些，的那的，告诉的，我打就是有人嘛，你长也打这个用过的，但不是他的修这个有为实际不好吃，但咱们就那这都也不有，的那的，告诉他这个那些研究什么当就。Rangi ning di pema ta de chil chu samsa cha tene toni to be shera samuta tene lote kaso de nime jingko chi chu samsa cha tene chanju sam samuta ne tene lote dawe jingko chi chu samsa tene lama chere sete chi kaso de rangi chibo le ye ta te tigente chi kaso de tene zingi rota toni ning jingko chi kaso ning jingko chi lam de ta toni ni ni boche de toni to be sherap de sherap komba touching bak ro komba touch bate cheres su shawalza onda su rakma de sometime kaza de ma pe to go to put up some time what the just which de what ku some de yorma what the ta ni ta ka chige kaso ta ka sherap kaso ta kaso de Rangshin chik taka che ku tende che resirikal shu yasa on tema chibon ma tende changtu ko chi semla tebu yukurwa ma ide chibon ma ta jula sa umena ma ide chode rangi ninga khatola ne so sabja che se chode tene tambi ka che ni ba ko sube tende shu pa de la mata ni ka de khane khul tungu so tene ni Tapama Tajet Mind of Beauty Neta Nation in the Father. Take the logic of a thing about check out the cutting the stem jobs. What in the check? That you book of get and room my then Chava you that what in the check, what in the check. And then color and Omani payment, to the jealous Sanga Quatic. Then Omara Pasanati, Omara Pasanati, the Delegate, and what the Jamaican Sanga. Then over yet my head of the Marshaman and what the lake was quoting. And then Lama Jealous City and the Puson Fuller, reception. Rangi Chibone, Anti Pagata, Lugi, Nantamja, Lug Chabne. And then Rangi Taka, Toma Navana, and Sabe, Luke on the summer, Nag on the side, Yik on the side, the Taka, you get you for la Soviet. And Chebek Hanama, Ranjay Hanama, Lasoma, and Sepila Sama, Sengama, Tigama, Homa, never sabe, the Tiba, the Kasura Takaji, Ganga, but Junction done. That the Kamba Nagut law took so much power enough, and Nagut, that never child, what is it? Yamato never child something, or what I was she would also. And how do the Takaja Range? New to sign there was long leg to get the less royal with the little tower to get the march. I can't Subuki the town that the day get you the top of you to give us to comfort Yabuto to get there, never trust something. And it's to show money what the queen of Yabuto. And how do you coming and I said the queen teacher Jim is up, you to sign them. And the coming and I said, come to China, Savara Japanese chat watch. 要不是读书说的搞不。
So, so we have the figure of Chen Rezig now on our crown on the pre-prepared seat, and so we prepare to continue that invitation to our heart center. We establish again the lotus, sun, and moon disk mandala seat on our heart center. Again, through going through the process of contemplating renunciation to establish the lotus, the mind of the correct view of emptiness to establish the sun disk mandala, and then the mind of enlightenment bodhicitta itself to establish the moon disk mandala seat. And so that's all established on our heart center. And then we make the invitation to Chen Rezig to come down through our crown chakra, down through the central channel into our heart center. Now we must kind of like understand here that the figure of Chen Rezig that we have on our crown is not so sense of a coarse body, but it's established through the meditative concentration, the quality of compassion, and then especially the quality of wisdom that establishes this body that we are visualizing on our crown. And so it's kind of being in the nature of wisdom. Then it has the ability to move through our crown chakra down through our central channel as we recite the invocation verse, "O glorious and precious Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind." And so, this then, with at the end of the first recitation, the journey begins down through the central channel. At the end of the second, arrives at our pre-prepared seat, and at the end of the third recitation, is established there until we ourselves attain enlightenment. And that assurance brings forth a tremendous sense of joy in us. That's wonderful that we have the Buddha to take care of us from life to life to life now until we attain the state of enlightenment. And that's wonderful. Normally, at this stage, you would recite the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, but we don't have that time here now, but that's often what happens at this point. And so that then the lotus leaves that we have established are turned upwards and then fold the figure, and that's sealed at the top by a 5-pronged white Vajra. And that's supposed to signify something that it counteracts the danger of the obstacle of wind or lung for long-term meditators. That this is kind of something that counteracts that. And so then we start to contemplate how then the light starts to emanate from within the enfolded lotus leaves, permeating those leaves, indeed permeating every single cell of our bodies from the crown of my head right down to the soles of my feet. And then really, all of that powerful purifying light is kind of getting to every single tiny cell of my body, purifying all negativities that have accumulated physically, verbally, and mentally. And that these negativities that have been naturally risen negativities, those that are proscribed by the teachings of the Buddha, that all of these are purified. That those that have been accumulated in this life, in previous lives, in all lives since beginning this time, and we have this sense that it's not just that they are dealt with in some nominal way, but they are completely purified, along with the imprints of those negativities. They are completely eradicated and gone. And then also that all the faults of my channel winds and drops are rectified. The 4 elements are rectified, and indeed all the faults of the physical body, that these are necessarily overcome as well to facilitate perfect spiritual practice. And that in particularly the fault of ordinary appearance is overcome, and that it's replaced by my being able to see everything in this pure aspect. This is established.
And so the and the Lama Jeresik good Lenji chicken and social lute Lama Jeresik Kulujusu, something social shindo travel same Yelencha, Lama Shajas two Lenji chicken and social center Lama Shajas Tulujusus, Rangil Lunga Yesu, the Lama Shajas Lama Jeresik Kuzon to more Yeme Chasu, something. And the Dewate, they don't much deton is no Yishikasu, something. Nedia, Negian Pampa, and
then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause together with the body of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body transforms into the enlightened body of Chenrezig. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of Chenrezig. And this is something that I again rejoice in, how wonderful that now I have the body, my own body, speech, and mind are indivisible from the body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. This brings forth a sense of bliss, which combines with voidness, and I abide in the non-dual wisdom of bliss and voidness. Also, this I recognize the place that I am in is also transformed from its contaminated state into a pure state of a palatial abode.
Lama Cheresi, Lama Cheresi, Kur Ketemati, and Nala Rashimeba, what the getting it, Nala Rashimeba getting it. What is Kumasha? Can't do and Kuka says Naya, and the day, dear, and you did to do some making. Talk about Pata something. What is a Kumachi shed on the Yakuya? What is it? Nala Rashimeba chat, Lola chatting it.
It seems from our own thinking that regarding ourselves in the state of as Guru Chenrezig, as the Buddha Chenrezig, that itself is doesn't exist in the way it appears. It lacks any objective existence. It's merely imputed by thought, just to instill that kind of a clarification in our own thinking at this point.
Lama Cheresi Kurjube. Tuga Hole, and we say part of member journey. We say part of member journey. Lama Cheresi ku part of member journey, and Kajaka Sinja Tangela, Takaja, Dory Sinja Tangela, and tip pop that timne, and Chazawa Timbalatene, and Dory Sinja Tangela, Jaja Lama Cheresi Kurju, some such. And you get Dory to get net that new Lama Cheresi share come to some such.
And then my now sending out as Guru Chenrezig, countless rays of light from the home at my heart, equal in number to all sentient beings, and countless emanations of Chenrezig, equal in number to all sentient beings, and they're dissolving into all sentient beings in all the six realms, causes them to spontaneously arise as Guru Chenrezig, fully enlightened beings. That their abodes, their places of being are completely purified of all fault, and they are transformed into enlightened palaces of enlightened beings. And this taking all of sentient beings to that state of Chenrezig, the virtue that brought them there, as the agent being the one who effected that, also lacking any objective existence and merely imputed by thought, and we keep our mind just on that mere negation of the object of negation.
안 대통령 있으면 이 시계소 삼사체.
From that contemplation arises bliss combined with voidness, and we abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
我的讲的哦，他这个他的没把一切上面，人不马头吧，安排你完全多，我那不然真的是有一个他的上面当完去，就见用处多么错的，这就多啊，因为就是说讲。
So that now we consider that, this reality that I'm merely visualizing now or imagining now, but before long, may I be able to accumulate all of the causes and conditions so that I quickly can bring that to reality, to manifest that for real, and make this powerful dedication.
我这个大概这说给大概这个我说给大概这个3年大概别在那起码的些呢亚个中安呢这如果中安呢这刚给我们的大概的基本呢这没些个包给那当肯定是肯定起码呢得到他这这个上级就告诉的多年你我这个浪就来结尾了讲这个事的多年都被写了别呢就来结个就说大概这
So then again, we reaffirm what we have been emphasizing throughout here today, that for each of us, whatever happens, good, bad, whatever situation we find ourselves in, regardless of what it is, may we use it to establish the causes for enlightenment, the causes for the perfection of the mind of enlightenment, the causes for direct realization of emptiness.
我这恐怕是我这讲我的当我这叫我的
make me You are of luck, Shabara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence, and Manjosri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception. Son Kappa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snow, Rosan Drakra, at your feet, Amen.